I think, no, I think it was often quite a shallow and virtual signaling response. I think my friend who put it on Twitter has quite a big profile, and it had, thousands of retweets and likes and shares. And I think people were tagging at Met Police, at at Arsenal in it, and I think they had to be seen to do something in the moment. So the police initially took a statement from me and said, yes, we're addressing this issue. We're on it. 3 months later, nothing. So I think it was a very virtue signaling response. I think the press as well perhaps tried to, again, report on it in a way, and I certainly spoke to some journalists who were very, but can you see that this is both sides? Can you see what difficult position the pub was in, for example? Can you see this? And tried to, I think, portray it as more of a pub fight violence rather than a racially motivated attack. And I had to keep stressing as well of just how offensive the Y word is. And I did a lot of press around this when it first came out, and I think lots of people were really surprised about how the history of the word yid and just why that is so offensive, and to have it shouted in my face. This was in no way the sort of drunken pub fight that I think a lot of people wanted to think it was. It was 5 much older men attacking a Jewish woman for being Jewish. And I think that's what so many people try to overlook in all of this. They were, I'd say, all in their 50s, white men they sounded like they're from the area, and lifelong Arsenal fans. And I think, and I've said this before, I think that's the difficulty, and I think Tottenham as a club need to do a lot more about this. Like, when they seem to reclaim the word yid, I think that implies that they're the Jewish club, and so therefore to hate Tottenham is to hate Jews. And I think that's something that these people didn't seem to understand. And so therefore they immediately turned on me, a Jewish woman, in that moment. And it also, I think, fits into the wider anti-Semitic narrative of Jews are never quite who they say they are. And they are never quite one of us. They're always somebody else. We're always another. And that's totally how I felt on that day. Yeah, it did. I think I've learnt to never shy away from my heritage, and I've always learnt to be proud of who I am. But that was the first, I think, time as an adult where I've truly felt my life's in danger here. And I think what really, really shocked me about that day, I think as Jews we grow up in this country knowing, I didn't go to a Jewish school, but knowing that our schools and our synagogues have security, we know the dangers to us. But I think something that really hit me on that day was that other than my friends who were there with me, nobody else in the pub, there were 5 people who attacked me, but in a way there were 50 people who attacked me by doing nothing. They saw exactly what was going on, and they did nothing, and they in fact joined in with the chanting at the end. And I don't know if that was mob mentality, I don't know, but I do know that knowing that you can't rely on people to keep you safe from racial abuse was a real turning point in seeing how I fit in this country. I truly hate to say this, I'd love to sit here and say that no, I still wear my Arsenal shirt and my Star of David with pride, but I think whenever I'm going to games, I am conscious of it, I'm conscious of who I am, what I say, and I'm conscious because also I know how violent calling something out can be. And I'm often in that difficult situation whereby I still hear the chants a lot, and I think to myself, if I call this out, could this be the one time that gets too far? Could this be the time where, yeah, that attack hurt, but could this be the time someone pulls out a knife? I don't know. And knowing how people feel about it, yeah, it's definitely changed the way I live my life, and it's also made me a lot more mistrustful of institutions that are supposed to help us, the police, etc. Yes, I think I would. I really like to think I would still call it out, because I think, on a very selfish note, I think the regret I would have is a lot worse than the kind of how I feel now. So I would like to think I'd still call it out, and I reflect on that situation a lot, and I think, what else would I have done? And I honestly don't know. I'd like to think again I'd call it out the first time, but yes, I'd still do the same thing. And I suppose the only thing I would do differently is perhaps, I mean, I would say I'd insist on staying in the pub, but you can't. What can you do when somebody asks you to leave? So yeah, I think I'd still do the same thing. I think I certainly carry with myself this idea that, I don't know, I always like to think I call it out when I hear it, and I remember thinking in that moment, and again, that in that 30 seconds between the first time and the second time, my heart was burning. I was thinking, God, why didn't I say something? Why didn't I say something? And I don't know where that comes from. I suppose it comes from that intrinsic sense of right and wrong and what you should do in those situations and standing up to people. But yeah, I do think often, like, and it should never be on Jewish people to call that hate out, because again, as I realise, the second you tell them you're Jewish, they don't just hate the Jew in the abstract, they hate the Jew in the room. And that Jew is you. So that's when it can, like, you can put yourself in incredibly dangerous situations, which with hindsight I did. I think, sadly, it does, and I've spoken to lots of Jewish people about this, I think sadly it does send a message that we're not welcome. I think, certainly when my family came to the UK, football was the way to integrate. It was a way to be part of something, be part of this country, be part of this culture. And I think this has shown that if you don't have to scratch too much beneath the surface to see that that's not true. So I think for the community, it has shown, from what I've seen, that firstly that people do still hold these attitudes on a quite widespread nature, but also that we, sadly, and I hate to kind of rehash a very popular sentiment in our community, that the David Baddiel thing, right, the Jews don't count, that, nobody there came to help me. And I think it does send a message that people don't really care about us, and they don't, or they think they try and explain it away. They try and say, oh, but it's just this, it's just that, rather than listening to us when we say, no, this is a racist attack. So I think that's what I've seen it's meant for the Jewish community, but I think for the society at large, I think, again, it shows where it shows how far we've got to go, and that, again, this is central London, relatively. We're not. People make out like we live in this, and we do live in this wonderful multicultural city, but these attitudes are still so pervasive. So I think it shows, that we've got a long way to come, and I think it also, again, the response I've had has been a lot of people being really kind and really, empathetic, but also a lot of people saying, yeah, it's not that bad, is it? It's not that bad. People trying to explain it away. And that's, I think, something that the whole of society, we can't seem to ever see Jews as victims of racial attacks anymore. I think, yes, I do. I think, they're very good, again, and this goes back to the point we made about the virtue signalling. They were very good at the start when they said, yes, we're in contact with the victim. Yes, we're addressing this. 3 months on, it's not on Twitter anymore. Where are they? They've really, I think, wanted to be seen to be doing the right thing. But again, actions mean a lot more. And I do believe they're institutionally racist way beyond the Jewish community. But I think in this instance, this was a really good opportunity for them to send us such a strong message that Jews do count and that we will protect you, and that's exactly what we're here for, and that is the opposite of what's happened. I've chased them up multiple times. I've gone through myself, through the CST, the Community Security Trust, who have been brilliant at advocating for them and lobbying to kind of get any updates, but
they haven't.
No, and you know, it's getting to the stage now where how hard is it? You know, every single venue, this venue has CCTV. I know they have the CCTV. I know that how difficult is it to identify people who were seen doing this attack? It's kind of all the pieces are there, but they're just not doing anything about it, and that makes me think their heart's not in it. As we're saying, I think it's very frustrating knowing that these people do go to this pub regularly. These people are caught on CCTV. They're almost certainly returning to the scene of the crime weekly, and yet the Metropolitan Police can't summon up the time to go and do anything about it. You know who these people are, you know where they go, you know when they go. It shouldn't be that difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I think I always try to be quite careful not to base my Jewish identity on my response to anti-Semitism. I try to not think, you know, I'm not a Jew in defiance, you know, of what other people might think. I think it has. I think it's definitely made me feel a lot closer to people who will understand how that feels and how it feels to be ignored, I think, by, again, society at large. And I think, you know, since then, this group called the Jewish Arsenal Fans Supporters Group has been set up, and I've met lots of wonderful people through that. And it's a shame because I think I grew up and was brought up to kind of, you know, look outwards, right? To not be, you know, go to a Jewish school, only have Jewish friends. I was brought up to like have friends from such a wide variety of backgrounds, and to kind of live outside of the community, and you know, keep one foot in, one foot out. But I think this is kind of slowly putting that foot a bit closer to the Jewish community because it showed, I think, that I can't rely on the wider community to have my back.